Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Yashodanandana Brajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Brajajanaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Yashodanandana Brajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Brajajanaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayom Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajagacharya Astatarasatasi Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Gaura Premanandi. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, text number 16. Nice verse, very famous verse. 1, 2, 16. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Sushusho Shadhadanasya
Shushushoshadatani
Vasudeva Kataruchi
Vasudeva Katharuchi
Syan Mahatsevaya Vipra
Syamahasevaya Vipra
Punyatirtha Nishevanat Shushushoshadanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi
Vasudeva Katharuchi
Syan Mahatsevaya Vipraha
Mahasevaya
Punyatirtha Nishevanat.
Punyatita Nishevana
O twice-born sages, by serving those devotees who are completely free from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Long purport. The conditioned life of a living being is caused by his revolt against the Lord. There are men called Deva, or godly living beings, and there are men called Asuras, or demons, who are against the authority of the Supreme Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita 16th chapter, a vivid description of the Asuras is given, in which it is said that the Asuras are put into lower and lower states of ignorance, life after life, and so sink to the lower animal forms and have no information of the absolute truth, the personality of Godhead. These Asuras are gradually rectified to God consciousness by the mercy of the Lord's liberated servitors in different countries, according to the supreme will. Such devotees of God are very confidential associates of the Lord, and when they come to save human society from the dangers of godlessness, they are known as the powerful incarnations of the Lord, or sons of the Lord, as servants of the Lord, or as associates of the Lord. But none of them falsely claim to be God themselves. This is a blasphemy declared by the Asuras, and the demoniac followers of such Asuras also accept pretenders as God or his incarnation. In the revealed scriptures, there is definite information of the incarnation of God. No one should be accepted as God or an incarnation of God unless he is confirmed by the revealed scriptures. Paragraph. The servants of God are to be respected as God by the devotees who actually want to go back to Godhead. Such servants of God are called Mahatmas, or Tirthas. That word is in the verse. Tirthas. Punya Tirtha Nishevanat. Tirthas. And they preach according to particular time and place. The servants of God urge people to become devotees of the Lord. They never tolerate being called God. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was God himself according to the indication of the real scriptures, but he played the part of a devotee. People who knew him to be God addressed him as God, but he used to block his ears with his hands and chant the name of Lord Vishnu. He strongly protested against being called God, although undoubtedly he was God himself. The Lord behaves so to warn us against unscrupulous men who take pleasure in being addressed as God. Paragraph. The servants of God come to propagate God consciousness, and intelligent people should cooperate with them in every respect by serving the servants of God. One can please God more than by directly serving the Lord. The Lord is more pleased when he sees that his servants are properly respected, because such servants risk everything for the service of the Lord, and so are very dear to the Lord. The Lord declares in Bhagavad Gita 18:69 that no one is dearer to him than one who risks everything to preach his glory. By serving the servants of the Lord, one gradually gets the quality of such servants. And thus one becomes qualified to hear the glories of the Lord. The eagerness to hear about God is the first qualification of a devotee eligible for entering the kingdom of God. Well, he's packed a lot of things in his purports. Om Agyana Tamarandasya Gananjana Sarakaya Chokshudin Meditam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Bhagavad Dharma starts with and rests upon throughout the process of hearing. We know from Prahlad's teachings, the bhakti process begins with hearing. Now there's a qualitative factor in hearing, but there's an absolute factor in hearing that's not contingent even upon quality, that is absolutely the sound vibration of Bhagavatam, or the glories of the personality of Godhead, Bhagavata Sevaya, as the previous verse. The rendering of service to the tirthas, either the book or the person who represents the book, who represents Krishna. The service to such, the message here is service to such tirthas makes one more eligible to receive the message of the book or the message of transcendence. On more than one occasion, Prabhupada asked a kind of rhetorical question. Here we are in a house, because in the early stage there weren't more elaborate temples, so the temple was a house, and sometimes it was rented, sometimes it was purchased, but we called that house, rented or purchased, a temple. Why? In the neighborhood, there's houses this side, houses that side. What makes this a temple and those houses? And the difference is, in the temple, there's forms of the Lord, whether it's a picture or a deity or something. And there's the book. Both the presence of the deity and the book make the place a temple. So one can make one's home a temple by having an altar where the principles of bhakti are that one before, not just, one's life is centered around the deity, that the home activities, one of the essential home activities is eating. And so, without going through the details, the earning of money, the spending of the money, the items purchased, particularly eatables, it's purchased in the consciousness of. I remember hearing long ago, and I haven't been able to find it subsequently, in one lecture, Prabhupada was outlining his life as a grihastha and was describing how a grihastha should live, morning till evening. Variations, of course, but in principle. So he always started from the rising in the morning and ended with taking rest in the evening and what went in between. Calling out, when waking, calling out the name of the deity or the Lord or the mantra, that was the Lord of one's life. So reminding oneself of one's position as the servant of the Lord by sound, calling. Then bathing, then fresh clothes, anointing with tilak, going before the deity, offering obeisances to the deity, prayers to the deity, making the place where the altar is, where the deity is, and it can be a picture or it can be a deity, same. Make it clean, although it's already clean, you make it clean, it's a principle. And then he went on to describe after daily sadhana, at some point, the cooking, and then he described the earning of the money is done in the consciousness that this is for Krishna. The money comes and it's spent for Krishna. One goes to the market to buy items with the consciousness, not that my child likes this or my husband likes that, but Krishna likes, I want the best because it's for Krishna, consciousness. And so one purchases, one brings back, it's Krishna, 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 and make it very clean, prepare in the consciousness because it's for Krishna, and in the preparation part is for Krishna, the offering is made for Krishna, taking the remnants for Krishna, and then off to work and doing the work activity for Krishna, the results not for one's aggrandizement or comfort, but one for Krishna, etc., etc. And in the evening, similar set of activities for Grahastha. He was just outlining recommendations in principle for a householder. Ending the day with prayers or some returning to the place of remembrance of the personality of Godhead, taking rest after a day that's dedicated Grahastha life, dedicated to Krishna service. It's ashram specific he was describing. The same principle applies to any ashram. So here it's not ashram, it's a principle, and we have deity pictures or paintings of the pictures, like in the beginning, the Hare Krishna movement was Guru Gauranga altar. That was Prabhupada's phrase. So the Gauranga altar was sometimes just a poster or a little print of something, Krishna, or he liked Panchatattva. He engaged artists. There's a whole group of artists that weren't like writing for his books. They were just making Panchatattva paintings. And temples had the Panchatattva painting and photograph of Prabhupada in Bhaktisiddhanta. Guru Gauranga altar, then deities, and then installation of deities, then eventually Radha Krishna deities, and so forth. There was a gradual escalation. Recently, last few days, a question came from somebody, a teenager. What's the difference? Because there was an installation in someone's home in Alachua, and the deity had been purchased by the mother for the daughter some many years ago, and the deity was then considered the daughter's deity, and she, the daughter, worshipped the deity for some years. Some years passed, she went off to college. The mother took over the worship of the deity, but they had never had any formal installation, so while there, we had a formal installation. So the question came, what's the difference between installed and uninstalled? What's the significance? And in short, the significance is the formality. Just like one can chant Hare Krishna, one can be initiated and chant Hare Krishna. There's a formality in the initiation process of establishing the connection by submission unto disciplic succession and acceptance by Krishna, and is formalized. So the installation process is formalizing, I am inviting Krishna into my home, so that the rest could be considered like chanting before initiation. It's preparation or it's purification. So it's absolute. But it then becomes formalized. The absolute becomes formalized. So that's the significance of installation. And similarly, installation of Bhagavatam. You can invite Srimad Bhagavatam, and that makes the home a tirtha. supposing you don't have a deity, you may have an altar, or you could make offerings to your Bhagavatam, because the picture of a deity or the picture of Krishna or Panchatattva, the Bhagavatam, all the same on the absolute platform that makes one's home a tirtha. And in addition to just having Srimad Bhagavatam, it's regularly reciting. So that's what's in the verse. By serving those devotees who are completely free from all vice. Syan mahat sevaya vipra. By such service one gains affinity for hearing. So there's other benefits. It's not like there's only one benefit, but that's a benefit from the sequence of these verses in Canto 1, Chapter 2. The affinity for hearing these messages is strengthened by rendering service to the person and or the book. Or both. And again, there's many benefits, but one of them is affinity for hearing. And that's how Prabhupada ends the purport. The eagerness to hear about God is the first qualification of a devotee eligible for entering the kingdom of God. So the way that Prabhupada is approaching these early verses of Canto 1, Chapter 2, which is a fantastic chapter. It's kind of like a panorama of the whole Bhagavatam. I mean, there are shorter versions of the synopsis of the Bhagavatam, the Chaturshloki verses, etc. There are places in the Bhagavatam that summarize the essence of the Bhagavatam. But Chapter 2 is expanding that, and then the Bhagavatam is expanding that. So it's good to know Canto 1, Chapter 2. It's good to know all the verses. But it's good to know the foundation of those verses, and this is one of them. So I'm just going to read the verse again, translation. Text 16. Oh, twice-born sages. So the speaker is Sutta. He's addressing Shonaka and the sages who are assembled together. Oh, twice-born sages, all of them assembled here, by serving those devotees who are completely free from all vice, prataktvena, punyatirtha. Great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva. So these principles, they're cross-disciplined, they're principles. Whether it's this ism, that ism, or another ism, the principles are principles that are to be observed. I mean, strong emphasis is don't claim to be God, and one shouldn't accept those that claim to be God. And what's the distinction? So one needs to know the distinction, because some people don't know the distinction. They want to blur it, or they have entire philosophy that says there is no such thing as living entity. All there is God. All there is Brahman, and all of that Shankaracharya ideology that has different iterations and versions. So that's not acceptable. The hearing of the glories of the personality of God, that's Bhagavad Gita, and hearing the glories of fill in the blank, some person of this world, it's not the same. It doesn't yield the same result. And if one doesn't have the personality of Godhead as a subject that's being glorified, by nature there'll be some other glorification of someone else on some other principles than transcendental principles, because it's just so, it's a nature. of a living being. They look up to somebody and appreciate somebody and speak about that somebody. It's quite natural. And Bhagavat Dharma is to change the channel. Just direct that propensity to unceasingly glorifying the Supreme. Shushushoshadanasya. Vasudeva. Kataruchihi. Okay. Strong emphasis in this purport about it's. I've not heard it specifically acknowledged by Srila Prabhupada that he composed his own prana mantra. However, it's who would compose Prabhupada's prana mantra besides Prabhupada? And so what did he choose aside from the standard one, the second one? He was very focused. And his prana mantra says it, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desatarine. Very focused on as our disciplic succession. Our disciplic succession is in the line of Madhvacharya, and following in Madhvacharya many wonderful acharyas, including Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But Madhvacharya's appearance was specifically to address this peril that Shankaracharya had created by impersonalism. And following right behind impersonalism is voidism. And it may be explicit or may not be explicit. It may just be implicit in how people speak, how people, the philosophy that they follow, how they conduct their lives, the character by which they conduct their lives. And it's pervasive. Strong persons, Shankaracharya and Lord Buddha, strongly influencing the world, and Madhvacharya wanted to go the other direction. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to take it further. So it's very important to have clarity about the peril of impersonalism and voidism, not just for the purpose of bashing, but for the purpose of protection, because that influence is strong. And if you're not attentive, you can easily be influenced. Teachers and teachings that bear that message, so prevalent. So, it's a strong part of his purport here. Anti-impersonalism. Just flipping it over the other way, when I was in Atlanta just before coming here, I was speaking on the first few verses of Canto 5, Chapter 5, Rishabhadev's teachings. And it's not in the first three verses, it's not in the verse, it's not in the Sanskrit of the verse, but Prabhupada takes the liberty, just like here's Mahatmas and Tirthas, he includes those who want the impersonal conclusion, the transcendentalists. Mahat Sevam Dwara Mahor Vimuktes, that verse. Mahat Sevam. Those personalists and the impersonalists explicitly in the translation, or it's not in the verse. So Prabhupada was, on the one hand, a lot of weight on this side of the pan scale, but it's not that he was incapable of looking at the other side of the pan scale with respect. So the respect goes to, you read those purports, verses and purports carefully, respect goes to the striving for transcendence. Brahma Sokyam Tvanantam is how the first verse ends. Spiritual happiness, leaving aside material happiness. So both the personalists, the impersonalists are striving for that. And he honors that they're striving for that. Better than the materialist is one who's striving for that. But then that's not sufficient, or it can be a peril if one doesn't understand the distinction between God and a living entity who is serving God or subordinate to God. That's needed. But a liberal side and a strong side, on the one might call it conservative. That's our founder Acharya. And that's the Bhagavatam. And our disciplic succession, particularly Lord Chaitanya. He was very strong. Lord Chaitanya was very strong about impersonalists, and sometimes his behavior was different in different circumstances. With Prakashananda Saraswati, he just avoided their association until Chandrasekhar Acharya and Tapan Mishra pleaded with him, please do something. They're vilifying you. And we can't bear it. Please do something. So he did something. A transcendental arrangement was made that he received an invitation. He accepted the invitation. He went, in great humility, sat at the foot bath, which is a dirty place. And they motioned, no, don't sit there. Come and sit in our assembly. No. He stayed by the foot bath. And then they said what they said. You're a sannyasi in our line, and you're doing things that sannyasis are forbidden. You're going with common people in the public and singing and dancing. And sannyasis are not to do that. Why do you do that? And that's what you do, and then here's what you don't do. You don't study Vedanta Sutra. That's what sannyasis are supposed to do, and you don't do that. You do the do-nots, and you don't do the do's. Could you explain? So his explanation was a message of humility. My spiritual master considered me to be a fool, and he instructed me, don't do the do's. Do this. Chant Hare Krishna. I found when I chanted Hare Krishna, it was so ecstatic. Started dancing, and the public were attracted, and the public was attracted, and so that's what I do. And then one thing he did, very nice, it's right in that section of Chaitanya Charitamrita, he exhibited his Brahman effulgence, because the sannyasis in Varanasi were interested in Brahman effulgence. So I'm the source of that Brahman effulgence, and he displayed it. And then he withdrew it. So that must have been very interesting. But he was, on the one hand, attracting them to that Brahman effulgence, but also disclosing indirectly that he's the source of that Brahman effulgence. He's the Supreme Person giving a teaching. So they said, if you understand, can you explain Vedanta Sutra? And he started explaining Vedanta Sutra in a way that they had never heard before. It was very simple, and they were moved. It's described in the course of that exchange, and etc. Prakashananda Saraswati and his thousands of sannyas followers became Lord Chaitanya's followers, just by his demeanor and his message. So that's Prabhupada's approach. But sometimes Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very strong and was intolerant. So it's not always one thing kind of a response. And Srila Prabhupada similarly was not always one kind of thing, but he was very clear what impersonalism is, and very clear what it isn't. So while there's some respect, there's also caution. Very clear caution. But it's nice to know there's two sides to that Nirvishesha Shunyavadi personality, our founder Acharya. Let's see if there's some discussion.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Hare Krishna Maharaj. I have two things. One is reflections from what you just gave a wonderful lecture. You wonderfully explained about our sampradaya, right from Madhvacharya to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Srila Prabhupada, the great Mahatmas. And I just want to share, when you saying that lecture, recently Jai Sachinandan Prabhu, in couple of his lectures, he mentioned from emotion comes devotion. So you also mentioned about the temple, cleaning a temple or having a temple at home. We can physically clean that. And I'm talking in terms of the heart. I mean, how to clean our heart and making a heart as a temple, and how to build that emotion naturally instead of like mechanically.
Well, keep things clean, your heart becomes clean. It works. And if it's not emotion, I mean, it sounds nice. It's a nice little phrase. From devotion comes from emotion. But I'm not sure that's what Scripture says. My understanding is transcendental emotion comes from devotion. Flip it around. Transcendental emotion comes from devotion. So to make one's heart clean, chant or do something that's just menial, like cleaning the pots. And it makes the heart clean, and emotions can come from when the heart becomes clean in devotion. And it doesn't require a preliminary emotion, then comes devotion. Devotion is submission for the pleasure of the Supreme. Emotion follows. Motion, transcendental motion awakens from that. Practical little example, personal. Long story short, straight from undergraduate school, headed to medical school, I took a leave of absence and went to the Boston Temple. For 1 month, I was washing pots. And there was grumbling inside, what are you doing? Why are you asking me to do this? I didn't say it, but that was the inside. It wasn't emotion. It wasn't a transcendent. It was a flippant, sarcastic, etc., false ego emotion. But I was told that Prabhupada said, you wash pots, you make your heart clean. By washing the pots, you make your heart clean. And my flippant side was saying to myself, oh yeah, then why aren't you standing next to me, man? Proud little fellow. But I stuck with it. And then I started meditating on Prabhupada said, it'll make your heart clean. And as that happened, somebody else gave me another one. And the other one was, Prabhupada said that when you wash the pots, the pot should be so clean you can see your face in the bottom of the pot. Now, I don't know if he meant where the flame goes, that bottom, or where the food goes. But I took it was where the flame goes, because in the early days, we were poor. So there were used pots. And the bottom of those used pots was black. So I accepted it in principle. And in the course of a month, all the pots, you could see your face in the flame part in old pots. And they weren't even flat. They were bumpy a little bit. And then somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, we found another pot washer. Would you like to come with us on Harinam? It's like, phew. So it was a submission to the instruction that brought about the purification, that awakened a different emotion than the prideful emotion and prideful intelligence and prideful existence. Krishna's kindness. But it was washing pots, following the instructions with the desire that I had faith in what Prabhupada's words were. Anyway, so That's a comment on your question. What's the process? Follow the process with faith. That's our teaching. Chant with faith. You can chant without faith. You can chant inattentively, but to chant attentive. So if you engage in bhakti, it requires the previous Adau Shraddha. Then Bhajana Kriya. Then, Sadhu Sangha. Then Bhajana Kriya. Then Anartha Nivritti. So that's the answer to your question is that one. It's submission to the activities given by sadhus in the company of sadhus with the aspiration that I want something because desire is of the soul. So recalibrate what the desire is. Away from jnana and karma to Krishna should be pleased. That's the definition of bhakti, and transcendental motion and everything else comes from that. So just align with that. That's how.
I have a question about the emotion again. I'm thinking what is the role of emotions before one comes to the purified stage, because emotions tend to be like if one expresses emotions, I often heard it's emotional. There is no value to it like that, or maybe some personal emotions are valued. So I'm just wondering, what is the role of emotions?
Well, the role of emotion is, generally speaking, people identify with their emotions. That's me. Because they identify with the mind, and what's in the mind is their emotion, not with me. So the role of emotion depends on what your self-realization. Your question is, before you get transcendental realization, what's the role of emotion? It rules your life. And you're kind of, like a cork on the waves of the sea. And the waves go up, the cork goes up. The waves go down, the cork goes down. And you're being tossed around. We, by the mind, the forces of the mind, are being tossed here and there. And going, whoa, whoa. And the role of emotion before there's purification is it rules our lives.
So the way out is?
The way out is yoga. Linking with the Supreme. And through the linking with the Supreme, Patanjali Yoga Sutras helps simplify things a lot. It says, the Bhagavatam verses are fantastic, but it's principle-based, sutra-based. And chitta vritti, the swirlings of the mind, are to subside. The purpose of the sadhana or abhyasa is to bring to a point of more stillness the swirlings of the mind. And then when the swirlings of the mind subside, just like the waves of the sea subside, then you can see deep into the sea, and then you can start to see, oh, that's who I am. Or somewhere down there inside, it's not just the mind and its swirlings, it's something else. It's the observer of the mind. And then, so, detachment. So you can observe, oh, look at this and look at that with detachment, including your mind. Now, that's not normal. It's not, let's say, not standard, but that's yoga. By definition. And then how do you get there? That's also by practice with faith. Faith is the starting entry point, and then it's meant to become, faith is also meant to be purified and properly aligned with principles, because we're going to have faith in something. It's in the mind. conceptions of life are carried in the mind. Faith in the material world is carried in the mind. Emotions are carried in the mind. The mind rules. So how to get to faith that's not ruled by the mind? Sadhusanga. And there's degrees of acceptance, and like this verse specifically, the service helps one get affinity for hearing the messages of transcendence that can carry us to the spiritual platform completely. Shuddha. Anything else? Online anything? Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.